I brought you in here as Stella's mum. Tell us about your journey to motherhood.
Ooh, journey to motherhood. Well, I didn't have much of a journey to motherhood because I first became a mother when I was just 21. So my eldest son is, over 40. Then, I had a long pause. Interestingly, to sort of link my career in with having Stella, I had made a film about sex and disability called Untold Desires back in 1994, long time before I became Stella's mum. So when Stella was born and we had a really rough birth, and that was what caused her brain injury. I had some notion of the world of disability because I had made a film in that space. I did have friends and people who I was, connected with through my work. So it wasn't completely alien to me.
So you were a journalist before having Stella?
Yeah, I'm not a journalist, I'm a filmmaker.
Okay,
so
yeah,
documentary
right.
films, not
Yes.
so much like journalism and
no,
news and that sort of stuff.
no. Yeah.
Long, slow films.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've been a filmmaker for many years when Stella was born.
And why did you choose to make that show about Untold Desires? Tell us about that journey.
Oh, now that was... So when I was at film school in 1992, I had another friend of mine who was at film school a year later, and she was looking for a documentary idea, something to make a film about for her film school film. And a friend of mine, an old friend of mine, had a friend who was working selling sex toys by mail order and a lot of her clients were disabled people. And it sort of piqued my interest, and I said to my friend, "Oh, you should make a film about this. Like this, I reckon there's a story here. There's like an interesting story." And she sort of looked at it a bit, and then ultimately decided to do something different. And then a couple of years later, SBS did an advertisement in one of the trade papers looking for documentary filmmakers to, with ideas, we want to commission films. And I was working with another filmmaker at the time, and we just went, yeah, we're documentary filmmakers. We can pitch this idea. I mean, I don't think the word pitch was even used back in those days. It was like, we can submit this as an idea. So I basically worked it up, and a few months later, SBS rang me and said, we'd like to commission your film. It was very easy in those days. No one wants to hear that now because it's totally not like that now. But back then, they took a punt, and we made a fantastically successful film.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I think I've even seen Untold Desires, but my memory...
You can see it on Disability Busters, my video on demand platform.
There you go.
Yeah, if you want to see it.
Okay.
And it's still pretty good. Like, it's held up quite well.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that it was shot on SP Betacam, so it's got that kind of lovely SP Betacam look about it. But
Okay.
That's just for the tech nerds.
Yeah, well, I'm sure I'm surrounded by tech nerds here. So you were speaking about Stella's birth and it being traumatic. How did you deal with the effect of Stella's birth and the circumstances afterwards?
Well, look, what happened was, because I had it was my second pregnancy, so I'd had like 16 years earlier a fairly straightforward birth, so I kind of thought I knew what I was doing, it's like kind of something you don't forget. And then during the birth we ran into some trouble, and there was a period of about 9 minutes where Stella was without oxygen. But I was like, when you're at that pointy end of giving birth, you're really not responsible for what's going on. You're dependent on other people around you to kind of manage the situation. And what happened was, the midwife that was with us in the hospital, she had never, it's a technical thing called a shoulder dystocia where the shoulders get stuck, and that particular midwife had never had one before, even though she'd been a midwife for ages. The midwife on the earlier shift had seen 3 or 4 of them. So we just got a little bit unlucky with the midwife, and she just didn't treat it with the urgency that was needed. So, but I was personally myself, I was pretty oblivious to what was going on. I think my husband had a more traumatic time because he was there kind of watching and not sure what was going on. So, and then of course, afterwards, Stella was in hospital for a couple of weeks, and it kind of began to sink in that, like, oh, okay, we're dealing with something here that, there's a bit of an aftermath. But then, in the months afterwards, I really believed that everything was going to be fine. So it wasn't really until Stella was about 10 months old that it became evident that, baby milestones like sitting up and crawling and, walking and that sort of thing were not happening. And it was like, okay, I think we've got something on our hands here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what did you do from that point? How did you plan for her future?
Well, it's really interesting because my husband is an architect, and he he has another architect friend who also has a daughter with cerebral palsy. And they were quite close friends. And the day after Stella was born, they came to see us in hospital. And in fact, I can clearly picture us all, we were at the Women's Hospital, and I clearly picture us all being at lunch in Lygon Street. And, you know, they had a daughter who was probably 6 years old, and they'd been through like lots of cerebral palsy related stuff, and they had a few little tips, and also his wife was a nurse. So they were kind of just the right people there. I wasn't really ready to kind of engage with the idea that Stella might have cerebral palsy, but they were certainly the people that we knew we would go to if and when it became evident. And so we saw a few people. We were trying to kind of make sure that we did as much prevention as we could, but very quickly I had someone I could call and we could, you know, connect in with early intervention things. And, you know, because really what you want to do is try and ensure the best possible outcome. It's like, okay, we're dealing with disability, but we also want to make sure that whatever Stella grows up to be is the best possible version of herself she can be.
That sounds almost heaven sent, having those people,
it was a really good start. So I wasn't floundering around. I mean, they were there on the doorstep the minute she was born, saying, "Here we are, if and when you need us.
Wow.
We hope you don't." And then we just went off for the next 6 months and did our thing. But then obviously there's a period where it's a point where you go, I mean, I did quite a bit of denial, you know, I'm good at that. So I did quite a bit of denial, but I remember it was around 10 months where I just kind of went, actually, no, I think we need to not stop denying that this is not a thing.
Yeah, well, that must have been very confronting and very...
Yeah, but I don't know, like, it just is, you know.
Yeah.
I think the more confronting thing that happens when you have a child with a disability is it's not so much that, it's the sort of soft passive exclusion that happens over lifetimes, you know, when kids are left out of things or you don't get invited to things. That, I think that's a lot harder than dealing with the pointy end of, you know, you've got something to deal with, you deal with it, you know, like it's the amorphous kind of neglect and overlooking and that sort of thing and underestimating. I think that's much more damaging.
Yes, I understand. How did Stella's birth affect your life's trajectory? What did you do and where did you go from having a disabled child to the mother that you are now?
Well, for me, it became a big deal because I'd made this film about sex and disability. I had these disabled friends. I felt like I'd been thrown back into that world for a reason. I don't know, it just felt like something that's like, okay, I've got to make the most of this situation. And by being in the world of disability, it's got to be good for Stella. And it's got to be good for me as well. It's going to provide opportunities to work where I felt like the sort of levels of early intervention and kind of therapies and things that we did with Stella in her early years took up a lot of my time. And it meant that I couldn't just go and work full time. So I certainly couldn't go on work in the film industry, which is typically 60-hour weeks. If I was going to do the best thing for Stella, I was going to have to manage my own work life. And so I thought, why not work in the disability space? No one else is doing it. I knew from having made Untold Desires that no one was making any films about disability. So I thought, well, I'm here, I'm in this world. And, you know, to be fair also, we're talking 25 years ago when there was much less expectation of disabled people perhaps telling their own stories and making their own films. I acknowledge that we've come a long way in that time, possibly partially due to some of the work that I've done. But, you know, at that time, I felt like there was no one looking at portrayal, representation, stories around disability, and I thought, maybe I'll just do that.
Yeah, well, you were a groundbreaker for sure.
Well, I think I probably was, but you know, people always forget.
Well, this is reminding them. Yeah. You've done a really good job.
No, thank you.
Thank you for all you've done for disability, and thank you for representation, and thank you for being Stella's mum.
Well, you just do what you do, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show, Sarah.
It's been a pleasure.